You're going to be convincing others to sort of follow you into the unknown. And you have to be honest with them and authentic.
The techniques are constantly evolving and getting better. And I just think there's so much good stuff to talk about and to share and to learn.
I think product is an amazing job. I feel very lucky to be a product manager, but with that comes amazing responsibility.
Development and the collaboration around it is evolving right now.
Tell me the story. Describe the world you created. How do people behave? What is the impact on the universe? For instance, what other problems will you create? Are you happy with this outcome? Are you happy with the story?
You're seeing an explosion of very good insights. People who are coming out and giving tons of insights and frameworks.
As product leaders, we have a huge responsibility here.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CPO Mastery Series. I'm Sandy Huang. I'm currently a head of product at Amazon, leading the visual search team for Amazon Shopping. I previously led the content and customer experience for Alexa on Echo Show devices. And I also served on the board of directors for Women of Alexa. So I'm very excited for today's topic. So today we're welcoming to the stage Amit Koren, who is the Chief Product Officer at JLL Technologies. Amit leads the technology strategy across all of JLL's lines of businesses. He's an expert at leading teams and organizations. And then prior to JLL Technologies, Amit co-founded Sudo, was a senior leader at Groupon and Monitor Group. So Amit's talk today will be about the importance and how-to of building diverse and inclusive product teams. So with that, let's dive right in. Amit, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Sandy. It's great to be here and appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with all of you on what to me is a very kind of personal and important topic around building diverse and equitable and inclusive product teams. I want to start out by saying I am not a DEI expert. It is not something where I have certifications or training, but it is something that I think about deeply and think about regularly, and something that is becoming I think a topic of greater and greater importance on our team, and hopefully on many of your teams as well. And so I thought I would just start by giving a little bit of background on JLL and JLL Technologies, because many of you, I'm assuming, are not familiar with who we are and what we do. And so just diving in very quickly, a bit about JLL. So JLL is the #2 commercial real estate services firm in the world. We were founded in 1760, believe it or not, which is not a typo, about over 250 years ago. We're at over $16 billion in revenue, have over 90,000 employees, and our mission is to shape the future of real estate for a better world. And we really live and breathe that mission and factor into all the decisions we make. The services that we offer our clients are everything from matchmaking between tenants and landlords, facilitating sales and financing of commercial real estate transactions, and managing real estate on behalf of both the tenants who occupy spaces and the investors who own spaces. JLL Technologies is much younger than JLL. We were founded in 2019 to really help JLL navigate the disruption and transformation of the commercial real estate industry that is being driven by technology. We have Sandy here, who's from Amazon, and I would use the analogy that commercial real estate is really like retail before Amazon. And so it's still a tremendous opportunity for changing the way the entire industry operates. Within JLLT, we have over 600 customers today and over 3,000 employees. And our mission within the JLLT team is to leverage technology to increase the value and liquidity of the world's buildings while enhancing the productivity and happiness of those that occupy them. So that's the context in which I operate. My team within JLLT is about 600 of those 3,000 employees. It's a cross-functional team across product management, engineering, design, and and operations. I wanted to start with why this topic is important to me, and what it means to me. And so I have a quick cartoon here. And what I would say is, I really do believe that diverse product teams, and when I say product teams, I don't just mean product management teams, but the entire cross-functional team that comes together to build, ship, and go to market with a product, are more effective when they are diverse and when they are representative of their customers and of society at large. But that to me is not the main reason to focus on DEI. There are many levers we can pull to make our teams more effective. And I think DEI has a separate and important standalone why, which is my personal reason. And that is that I believe it's the most effective way that I can do my part in creating a more just society. And this particular, I think, cartoon kind of shows what that means in terms of a just society. And when we talk about DEI, I do believe it's a personal topic. I believe it's an emotional topic. I believe it's a very meaningful topic. And so I will share with you my thoughts on it over the course of the next few minutes and few slides, and eager to hear your questions at the end and to hear a little bit more from you and to discuss with you, Sandy, kind of how you think about DEI within your product teams. This is a CPO mastery series. And so as product leaders, I think the first step is really understanding what's the outcome that we're trying to strive for. And step one in that is defining what do we mean by diversity. So when we think about DEI, we really think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes they all get bundled together, but it's actually really important to think about all three of those separately. In the interest of time today, I'll be talking mostly about diversity and inclusion. We'll talk equity is something else. And my focus is on what teams can do to drive DEI, not necessarily what companies can do to DEI. So the scope of this is really what you as a product manager or a product leader can do within the construct of your team and the kind of levers that you control, not necessarily the way that a whole company should approach DEI. And so step one, as I mentioned, is defining diversity. And the question is it as simple as this, right? On one side, we have teams that are not diverse, in this case, all one person. And on the other side, a picture of people of different races and different sexes and potentially different genders and different ages. And, is it as simple as saying one is diverse and one is not diverse? And, my answer to it is it's not that simple. I think we can say for sure that the picture on the right is more diverse than the picture on the left, but there are many aspects of diversity that are hard to see. You can't see it in an image. There are things like whether somebody is a veteran or not, whether somebody has a disability or not, where in the country or the world they grew up. And when I think about diversity, it's not just about the way you look, but it is more broadly the experience that you bring, the perspective that you bring, and the overall set of collective experiences that form who you are, how you make decisions, and how you think about the world. Another dimension that I think is hard to define is in the global context. What does that mean? So within JLLT, we have teams all over the world, in the US, in Singapore, in Tel Aviv, in India, in Eastern Europe, in the UK. And in each one of those contexts, diversity means something different. So if we think about, having a team in Singapore, for example, if that team is led by an expat, is that diversity or is that not diversity? What do we mean by diversity when we talk about, in India and in our teams in India? The cultural context matters a lot. The kind of ethnographics of a given country matter a lot. And so that makes it hard to define what we're striving for. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes it hard. But there truly is, the analogy I think of is like a multidimensional Rubik's Cube. And as you're thinking about diversity, I think it's important to take into account all of those different dimensions. So going quickly to our diversity focus on my team within JLLT and more broadly within JLL, I think about it as increasing the representation of backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences that are underrepresented on our team and underrepresented in technology as an industry. And so that's quite different, within the context of JLL, the big commercial real estate services firm. What underrepresented means for them is quite different than what underrepresented means within the context of the technology industry. And so when I think about it, I think when all of you think about it, it's starting to get at that notion of underrepresented. Sometimes it's hard to define, but you know it when you see it, you know it when you meet it. And so the challenge is that, how do you measure a diversity of perspectives? How do you measure how do you define metrics that allow you to actually see if you're making progress on this? And what we've done, and I'll share a few tactical examples, is we've really asked all of our hiring managers to commit to representing people who are, to sourcing candidates and interviewing diverse slates of candidates who are underrepresented on their specific teams and on our team more broadly. So these are a few kind of specific actionable recommendations, things we've implemented on our team that I wanted to share with all of you. The first one, this is one I just hit on, is really ensuring that your recruiting team and support from your recruiting team is dependent on individual managers their commitment to interviewing at least 2 diverse candidates for every role. And so we, at the beginning of every quarter for every hiring manager, we say, if you would like support from recruiting, you have to personally commit and affirm that you will do the following. In some cases, we can measure it. In some cases, we can't. But the ask is you must interview at least 2 diverse candidates for every role. And we see that when our hiring managers emphasize that and ask the recruiters for that and have personally said, I will do that we drive more diverse candidate slates, and that translates to more diverse pools of talent. The second thing we've done is for early career positions, we focus on potential, not on experience. So very specifically, as we think about our internship program, as we think about our early career opportunities, we've started to eliminate GPA requirements, kind of ignore which universities people come from. This was something that I was very guilty of in my past, is being an education snob. And when I read a resume, go straight down to the education and see where the person went to school. And I've realized that if we do that, we automatically weed out a much more diverse and representative set of candidates. And so we now focus on really striving to do direct outreach to places where we wouldn't typically where the resume typically wouldn't bubble to the top. And the other piece of it is, as we think about product management roles in particular, can we think about sourcing from non-technical backgrounds, and can we create career paths that might not be a product management role initially, but kind of give people exposure through a support role and then through a associate PM role, and kind of put them on a path that drives them towards a product management career where they might not have been eligible if you have a strict computer science technical requirement for it. Third thing we've done is to create opportunities for people from non-product functions to move into product management roles. And again, start in a more junior product management role, but it's kind of people from ops, people from sales, people from customer service. What I have found throughout my career is that some of the best product managers come from teams that just have a very close interaction with customers, who understand their customers deeply, and who can learn the product craft over time and can learn how to lead product teams over time, but truly start with that empathy for their customer, which I think sometimes when you come from a technology background, you're missing. For more senior leadership roles, we often use agencies for our recruiting. And this is one where I have found it remarkably difficult to keep our agencies focused on diverse candidate slates. And so this is one where we demand diverse candidate slates, and we demand it over and over and over again until we see those candidates, because there's a natural incentive in all these systems to recruit and fill roles as fast as possible. As a hiring manager, there's always urgency. I always want to fill a role as fast as possible. As a recruiter, whether internal or external, there's a natural push to fill roles as fast as possible. And in this case, there is a trade-off between diversity and between speed. And you have to be willing to accept that trade-off in order to actually drive greater representation on your teams. The fifth one is to experiment with AI-based sourcing tools. So we've had good luck with a particular tool called HireFly. It's a small plug for a company founded by a good friend of mine, but we've been really shocked at the extent to which that's allowed us for certain roles to get a more diverse candidate pool. And it just goes to show you how much, our own sourcing, our own kind of filters that we apply are unconsciously biased. When we put the computers on the task, they tend to do better than we do. And then the sixth one, and this is for all of you, is to really make it a personal mission and lead by example. If you as leaders on your team make this a priority and talk about it and ask your teams about it and make sure that you are driving this as a constant item on your agenda, your team is much more likely to follow suit. So changing gears a little bit now to the inclusion side. This is a great quote I read in a book I'm still reading called Unconscious Bias that I highly recommend. This is from Pam Fuller at Franklin Covey, and she says, "Leadership cannot be great if it isn't inclusive, if it leaves anyone behind. Leaders must ensure that each member of their team can confidently state, I'm a valued member of a winning team, doing meaningful work in an environment of trust." And that to me really speaks to what it means to be included. And it speaks to me to the opportunity and the challenge. Whereas diversity, I'll use a geeky analogy here for all you product people. Diversity is kind of simple arithmetic. I add more diverse candidates, my ratio improves. Inclusion is more like calculus. It's really the integral of all the behaviors of everyone on your team throughout the entire day, every day of the year, that makes your company and your culture either more inclusive or less inclusive. And it really is a spectrum. And that spectrum is not something you can measure on a company basis. It's something that each individual feels. And so that same book, Unconscious Bias, includes this spectrum of inclusion, which I find is a very helpful mental model, because that, the spectrum basically says there's three distinct areas: the damaging zone, the limiting zone, and the high performance zone. And most of us think to ourselves, we're good people, we're not in the damaging zone. But just because you're not in the damaging zone doesn't mean that you're all the way at the top end of the high performance zone. As someone who has lived and worked most of his career in that valued bucket, I can say it's pretty great there. When you're working, when you feel valued, when you feel like, respected, and when you feel included, it's very easy to do your best work. But the moment that you don't feel that way, it becomes a lot harder. And so I wanted to share a couple of interesting examples as we've had this conversation on my team recently, just to bring this to life. And my first mental model of this was that we as a company had to march up the spectrum, right? Move over from, like, maybe today we're in the limiting zone, and we as a company to move into the high performance zone. And I think that was the wrong mental model. Really what the spectrum shows is how each individual on your team might feel. Some will be in the valued, some will be in the ignored, some will be in the slighted. And it's not something where they feel that way all the time. You can think of this really as almost like a barometer, and people are moving up and down this based on interaction they're having every day. So we had an offsite recently, and at that offsite, we were doing some brainstorming on how we could operate more effectively as a team. Somebody, one of the topic areas was how do we move faster? Somebody gave a presentation talking about an abstract product manager, and a couple of times referred to that product manager as he. And I was sitting next to the presenter, and I could literally feel the energy behind me change when there was a woman sitting behind me. And she didn't say anything, but I could just feel that she was getting frustrated by this referral to the product manager as he. And so you can imagine in that moment, she went from feeling valued to feeling, tolerated or ignored. And when you move into that spectrum, all of a sudden you move to a much more emotional state, right? You move to a much more, a much less productive place to collaborate and to work. And it was such a small thing. The person speaking didn't think about it. And in that moment, I corrected him, right? I said, like, he or she. And as a leader on the team, having that come from me as a man, not a woman, I think was very meaningful. The person behind me told me after, it was meaningful for it to come from me. And it's such a small thing. But in that moment, when I said or she, suddenly like her personal barometer like started moving back towards the high performance zone. And I think that I call out that story because it's representative of how hard this is, how many individual small choices we make on a given day in terms of how we respond to people, how we react, the words that we use that drive this and drive it for people in a very meaningful way, but in a way that's hard to measure. It's very hard to know how well you're doing in inclusion. We have a performance, we have a semi-annual people survey that we do. We have an inclusion index on it. It gives us a rough metric on how we're doing. A, it's hard to move the needle on that metric, and B, it's hard to know exactly what you should do to move that metric. And so this is a conversation we've started having as a team. It's not an easy one, it's an uncomfortable one. At that same offsite, we had a discussion about this the next day. And I asked my entire leadership team, I said, how many people think that they're awesome at this? And not a single person raised their hand. And then I asked the question, how many people want help getting better at this? And every single person raised their hand. And so that, that tells me we obviously have a long way to go. If our leaders don't feel like they're very good at this, then they're probably not doing a great job at it. And if our leaders are saying, I want help, I want to get better, that's a really good sign that we have momentum and that we're moving in the right direction. And so I say that with the kind of express acknowledgement that this is hard, that making progress on it is slow and steady. I have a few specific recommendations here. And Sandy, as we get to Q&A and discussion, would be eager to hear what you and your team have done to be effective in this as well. So number one, and I think this is the most important one, is just start talking about inclusion. Keep talking about it, even when it's uncomfortable. It is something where if you don't talk about it, it's easy to lose focus on it. It's hard to stay focused on something that's hard to measure. But if you don't keep talking about it, then you won't get better. This second one I have found to be remarkably effective, which is adding DEI questions to our interview panels. So for example, we'll ask questions like, tell me what building a diverse and inclusive means to you personally. Why is it important to you? Or please tell me a time or give me an example when you've championed a specific DEI initiative. What did you do and what was the outcome? I can tell you the first time somebody asked me a question like that, I was like a deer in the headlights. I had no idea how to respond to that question. My answers today would be much better than they were even 2 years ago when I was applying for this role and others. It helps you to weed out people who don't care about it. And the other things it does is it starts to help you close people who do care about it. When you ask about it, people realize it's important to you. And so they're more likely to come, more likely to join your team. Third one is to promote education and awareness. Start with yourself, get educated, read about diversity, read about inclusion, share what you learned with others, start doing it in a prominent and public way. And that will just, again, keep it on people's agenda, keep it top of mind. Fourth one is to join business resource groups. We call them BRG groups here. We have our Black professional networks. We have our business women's network. Especially if you're overrepresented like me, all the more reason to join the BRG groups and to hear the perspectives and to understand the challenges so that you can become more of an ally. Fifth one, and this is in a way, it's an obvious one, but I've heard time and again how important it is, which is to really connect with everyone in your team at a personal level. Ask people about their families, ask them about their hobbies, ask them about their passions. It starts to make them feel like you care about them as humans. When somebody cares about you as a human, you feel more included. It doesn't matter if they're diverse or non-diverse. Is a really, to me, a critical part of understanding your team, understanding where you're coming from. And when you connect with them on a personal level, they're more likely to be open with you about the challenges they're having. And the sixth one's a little more abstract, but it's to be quite intentional about how you allocate your non-monetary currencies, what we call them here. And the idea is that at every company, obviously you have your compensation, you have your bonus, you have your RSUs. But in addition to that, you have specific opportunities that you're giving people or not. You have your time and how you're doing your one-on-ones. You have the opportunity to mentor people, in different contexts. In a product team, it can be who's taking on a new role, who's presenting in front of senior leadership, and to be really mindful and intentional about how you're allocating those currencies and how you're giving out those opportunities, and can you ensure that you are being inclusive and fair and equitable in how you're allocating those currencies. I think those are all the prepared remarks I had. I, again, appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. Hopefully, some of these specific actionable tips help you and your teams build more diverse and inclusive product teams. Sandy, would love to hear any questions that you have or any questions that have come in from our audience.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was really great and insightful, and I love that you have specific actionable recommendations, because a lot of times we hear these talks about diversity and inclusion, but you don't really know exactly what to do. So I think it's important, having specific things there for people to walk away with. But I think that the lead by example is really important, and especially what you were saying about being overrepresented folks leading by example, because that really sort of sets the stage for people to feel comfortable, to speak when they need to, and correct others when they need to. And I think that the training on the unconscious bias is really interesting, because if you've gone through that training, you just realize how many unconscious biases there are.
Absolutely.
We did something on our team where before the managers, before we talked about promotions, we would read an unconscious bias document as a refresher every single time to say, hey, we want to be fair here. We want, we want to make sure we're aware of our unconscious biases before we go into making decisions that involve people. So great. So thank you for that. If anyone has questions, we can take some questions. Otherwise, let's see. Okay. No questions from the audience.
All right, great.
All right. Well, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Sandy, I'm curious. Besides the leading by example, anything else that resonated with you or didn't resonate with you? Anything that you guys are doing particularly?
Yeah, I think what you the definition of diversity, I think people do jump to, oh, okay, it's gender, it's ethnicity, but there's so many different aspects of diversity. And you touched upon it when you were saying you were looking at schools, people coming from different schools. I mean, there are so many different schools, and certain schools have produce people with certain trains of thought, and then if you get over-indexed on any one of those areas, it's not creating that diversity, right? So so I think that was a very important one to
another interesting dimension we've encountered is even a combination of big company and startup experience, kind of balancing that entrepreneurial mindset with the enterprise mindset of, this thing's got to run, it's got to have, 5 nines, versus, we got to get out there fast, we got to break it, we got to make it happen tomorrow, is a very different mindset. And if you don't have that balance of perspectives, then you're likely to miss the mark one way or the other.
That's right. And I think as product leaders, when we think about our team and think about, the strengths and weaknesses of the team, and sort of what the team is really strong in, what, areas that need more representation and more diverse thinking, as a product leader, being able to kind of think that, and as you're hiring, those are specific things that you can, you can look for. Yeah.
Agreed.
Great.
Excellent.
All right.
Well,
we have a question.
Excellent.
Okay. Jaya asks, what are your thoughts on candidates with job gaps in their resumes, unemployment? How might you assess their potential?
It's a great question, Jaya, and I'll be the first to admit that's definitely a bias I have. Is when I see those, it starts to like raise questions in my mind. Like, what does that mean? Why was there a gap? Did they have a hard time finding a job? As I think about assessing people based on potential versus experience more broadly, and then I'll come back to your specific question, I think earlier career opportunities, it's much easier to make bets on people's potential than it is as you get later and later, right? The more senior the role, the more critical it is that they come in on day one and can be effective in the role. I think when it comes to job gaps, I often just try to understand why, and I think that requires a conversation. Now, if you're just screening a resume, it can be hard to get at the why. But if the candidate otherwise has experience that looks relevant, I would say move them into the next phase and try to get an understanding of the why. And if the why is, a red flag, then it's a red flag. And if the why is, I spent some time with my kids, that's a great reason, not to. It's a great reason to move forward, not to kind of hold it against them.
And this is actually a common question that I hear from women who take job gaps to raise kids, and with the concern that it'll be hard to find employment afterwards. And there are all types of employers. There are employers that are very that won't even skip a beat seeing that, and employers that maybe do, right? And that shows you the dedication of that particular company's understanding of life. So yeah. So it's your opportunity to kind of suss out the company as well. All right, we have another question from Zishan, which is, when hiring people from non-technical backgrounds, how can companies help others gain technical knowledge and they gain the confidence to do their job? That's a very good question.
For sure. I think there's a natural temptation to go into formal training, to get somebody into some sort of MOOC or whatever else it might be. I have found the most effective way is to allow them to shadow somebody who is doing the role and allow them to work kind of directly for that person in a role that doesn't require technical knowledge. And we talk about associate product manager roles and owning specific features. I think you can pick up the technical knowledge you need, not quickly, but you can pick up the bare minimum you need to be effective quickly. And then, through your own passion and pursuits, go deeper and deeper. And I find that, as you get deeper and deeper into the product management role, you tend to get deeper and deeper into the technology. Again, depends very much on the context and specific role and what type of team you're working with. But I find create opportunities for people to pursue their passion and to find the training that they need, but really doing the job is the most effective way, as opposed to an online training course.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think, Sandy?
Well, you know what? From someone with a non-technical background, I've done a lot of training on the job. So I'm definitely, in the camp of hiring people from non-technical backgrounds and doing it. I think it's really that willingness to roll up your sleeves and learn, right? I think we all have different aptitude for wanting to learn on the job, or just come in like mastering the job, right? So definitely, I think learning on the job is great, and companies can help support and sponsor for anything outside, but I think learning on the job is best.
And one way you can screen for that is to ask people, hey, tell me about a time when you picked up something completely new on your own, kind of out of your own interest. And people who sit there and don't have a good answer to that question probably don't have the growth mindset you need to learn how to do product. And people who come up with 3 things off the bat, where they're like, I just learned how to do X, and I just learned how to do Y, and I'm learning how to play the piano, are probably about more likely fit.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we have another question coming in. Okay, so hiring for later in the career, do you increase the index on their potential to lead diversity or look for demonstrable experience in that area?
I would say for later in the career, we we do anchor on demonstrable experience. I think it's very hard to step into a senior leadership role if you don't have that experience and kind of cross fingers that the person will be effective. I think you can kind of go one notch down and say, hey, could they do, if it's instead of a director role, could they do a group product management role and kind of learn to step into that director role later as they get that experience? So that's one approach. And the other is, I think really just being really focused on I won't make the offer until I speak to at least 2 diverse candidates for that role. And I'll just continue to demand from my recruiters that I see a more diverse slate. And that's what we have found to be the most effective to get diverse senior candidates, is just having the patience and the determination to wait it out, which is really hard in a high pressure context.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, and this question actually makes me think of what your point earlier about the hiring diversity in the early in the career. And just want to reiterate how critical that is, because as people move up in their career, right, it really starts with this sort of this concept of a broken ladder, where the hiring, if it's limited in the beginning, as people move up in their career, there's less and less candidates. So it's just really important to focus on early career hires.
I also go back to that kind of why slide I shared at the beginning, and that idea of a more just society. And I often think, if I poach a diverse candidate from Google and they come here at the same level, have I really, my diversity metrics went up a little bit, their diversity metrics went down a little bit. What have I really done? When I find ways to create opportunities for people, especially early in their career, that they might not have had, or find ways to give people a more senior role that they might otherwise have somewhere else, that's where I feel okay, now I've kind of moved the needle a little bit on the overall kind of society metric, as opposed to my specific kind of siloed metric.
Great. Yeah, I like that definitely the wider view. Wonderful. Okay, so it looks like we have no more questions, so we will wrap up. Just want to thank Amit very much for this really important and insightful talk.
I appreciate it, Sandy.
Yeah.
And one very important note is we're hiring actively. So if anybody's interested, please reach out. This is my most important plug. My email is amit.koren@am.jll.com. So if you're interested at all in commercial real estate, prop tech, or JLL, give me a shout.
All right. Take him up on that.
All right. And thank you, Sandy.
Thank you. I also just want to thank our audience of senior product leaders who've joined us from all around the world, and hope you'll all join us again for the next CPO Mastery Series talk. Bye-bye.
Likewise. Bye.